This is Rostra, the St. Theodore Guerin Junior Classical League podcast, where we bring the lessons of classical study into the light for the benefit of all.
Welcome back to Rostra. We've got a familiar guest, perhaps, if you're a longtime listener to the podcast. We've got Robbie Fraga with us today and talking about something of, I'm going to say it this way, of gruesome interest. It is gruesome interest. It's certainly something that is very much associated with the Romans, and unfortunately so. So, first of all, what are we talking about?
We are talking about the influence of the Roman Empire over the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Not the lightest of topics, but it certainly is an interesting one.
Yeah. So obviously we're talking about the historical event of the crucifixion of Christ. And as you and I were just mentioning right before we started the recording, there were many, obviously countless, we'll never know how many people Rome crucified as a form of execution.
Honestly, I don't even want to know the numbers.
No, we don't want to know that. We know even as far back as the famous Spartacus gladiator revolt, the survivors of the war against them, the Romans crucified up and down the Appian Way. So we know that this was a Roman, how should we say, preferred method of execution. But you want to specifically focus on the execution, the crucifixion of Jesus, and the Roman influence in that. So take us into that, if you would.
Yes, this is a Catholic school, but we're going to look at the whole story, but without that Christian viewpoint, just to get into the actual history.
So get into the history.
So we start off, Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus praying, Judas betrays, arrested. But we know that the high priests were the ones doing the whole trial, which was obviously rigged. So they take him to Pilate. Pontius Pilate was one of the prefects at the time. So the Roman Empire was big, and they couldn't manage the whole empire. So they needed to elect people to be in charge of a certain area. So they elect Pilate. Pilate looks at the whole situation. He's like, okay. Ooh. So he's like, nah, I don't want to deal with this. So he sends Jesus to Herod because he was from Galilee. Herod's like, okay, show me a miracle. Jesus refuses. It's like, okay, this guy's no fun. Back to Pilate. And this is where we really get into the story because it was Passover at the time.
Okay, let me interrupt you right there. So you bring up a very good point. That Rome, by this time, was so big. It covered so much territory. Rome controlled so much territory. That you have to have other people to lead in these different areas, right? You can't just have the one emperor who can possibly oversee all the day-to-day stuff. So you've got these regional governors, exactly what you said. So this guy named Pontius Pilatus, as you say, we typically call him in English Pilate, and Pontius Pilate. And so his job is to do this. And I got to say, a lot of, you hate to use the word, but a lot of bureaucrats, he doesn't want to deal with this. This is one more hassle. It's like, oh, good grief.
Yeah.
And I don't want to start an uprising. If the locals get all upset, then we got to bring in the troops. And it's more of a bureaucratic nightmare, right? So he sends him off, hopes to kind of push him off on somebody else. Herod won't deal with it. Sends him back to Pilate. So now Pilate's got to deal with it. Yeah.
Great. And Pilate's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to deal with this. And it's actually kind of weird that the night before his wife had this dream about this innocent man being accused. Like, no, Pilate, don't get involved with this guy. Yeah. He's innocent. And obviously Pilate knew Jesus had done nothing wrong. There's no charges against this guy. He's done nothing wrong. But
because he admits that. He says that, right? This guy's done nothing wrong.
The Pharisees want him dead.
Yeah.
So, and it was Passover at the time, and Passover is a really big Jewish holiday. So Pilate's like, okay, I'm gonna give you guys a choice. We're gonna release an inmate, and I'll let you guys choose who. So we have Barabbas.
Yep.
Who was I don't know if he was something I can't say for the sake of saying it, or a murderer.
He was what we call an insurrectionist. Yeah. So he was a violent man.
Right.
I don't know if you quite go to the level of terrorist, but certainly in that vein. And so clearly a criminal. And if you were going to have the death penalty, this would be the kind of person that you probably would execute.
Then Jesus, who, as we know, did nothing wrong.
Right.
So the people want Barabbas. I'm like, okay, that's a messed up viewpoint, but who am I to stop you?
Yep.
So they release Barabbas, and then in the Bible we see like how do we want, like, what do you want me to do with Jesus? And they start like crucify him. And I'm looking at the story from the Gospel of John, and in the Gospel of John it says, if you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king sets himself against Caesar. Because, like, the whole thing, like, are you the king of the Jews?
Right.
But that's where Pilate kind of got scared.
Yes.
Because, like, oh my gosh, this is going to be an uprising. Caesar's going to get involved. I'm going to get fired.
100%.
He was terrified.
And as you said, these leaders, the local Pharisees, they knew exactly what buttons to push with Pilate. They knew that this guy would be worried about losing his job, perhaps even losing his life, if he's seen to be in some way anti-Rome, anti-Caesar. And so they push his buttons. Man, they know exactly what to do.
And so Pilate snaps kind of, and he says, you know what, like he said, like literally in the Bible, I don't have the verse, but he said, like, I wash my hands of this. His blood is on your hands, not mine. I don't want to get involved. And so Jesus is let out to be crucified. And here's where we get into the whole aspects of crucifixion. Before then, he had been beaten, scourged, crown of thorns, and scourging, I don't think it was for Roman citizens.
Well, and that's the thing of it, is that this is such a violent punishment. You didn't do it with Roman citizens, but people think about crucifixion, oh, we're nailing you to a cross, and that's certainly bad enough. But again, you're bringing in the other aspect of it, which it was more than just that. You were beaten first, before being nailed. And you use this word scourge.
Because he was, like, whipped.
Yeah, can you explain a little bit about what that is?
So the Romans would use this like kind of whip thing called a Roman flagrum, and the reason it hurt so bad, I actually Googled this, is because they would put pieces of leather, glass.
That's it.
Oh God.
Yeah,
it was horrible.
You tie sharp stuff into the ends of the whip straps, right? Rock, metal, whatever, and then that obviously does more damage to the body. So. And
supposedly Jesus was scourged like 39 times.
That's right.
And then, well, this isn't for a typical Roman, but since the Romans were like making fun of him, they placed the crown of thorns on his head.
Then that, you're right, again, that was not a normal part of the punishment. That was just the Roman soldiers being cruel.
Douchebags.
and just horrible,
And no, you actually get started with the whole story of the crucifixion. In Catholicism, you can obviously pray the Stations of the Cross to go along with that, but we're going to go from the historical point of view. So they take Jesus out, he holds the cross, and they take him out to this place called Golgotha, or we call it Calvary, which means in Hebrew the place of the skull. And when they arrived, they offered him like some wine for the pain, and Jesus said nah. So they supposedly they wouldn't nail your palm.
We often have that imagery, and you see that in art sometimes, but you are exactly right, and I think this would be an interesting point for people to learn. Why would they not nail you through the palm of your hand?
Because the palm, it could like rip. The palm could rip.
Your palms are not strong enough to hold your body weight.
They would most likely do your wrist.
Through the wrist, absolutely. A stronger area to actually hold the body weight.
And then for your feet, I think they would tie probably like by your, not by your ankles, but
kind of around in that area.
Yeah, in that area. And from what we know, it was around 9 a.m. when Jesus was nailed to the cross. He lasted until we call it 3 p.m. or I call it the mercy hour.
Yeah, so around mid-afternoon, right?
And in the story, Jesus was mocked on the cross, if you can say you can save others, but you can't save yourself, come down from the cross and we'll believe that you're the Son of God. And he gives he gives Mary to John. He gives Mary to the church, essentially. And, at 3 p.m., he raises his hands out, says, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit, and Jesus dies.
Yeah. And, you think about it in terms of, if you do bring in the faith aspect of it, that this was not unknown to God. This is the way that this was going to happen, right? Because you can even get from the Old Testament,
the tree of life.
Cursed is the person who hangs on a tree, right? So Jesus becomes the curse in place of other people.
Right.
But working through this very distinctly Roman form of execution and punishment, yeah. So good stuff.
That's the end of the story where we're starting, because that's obviously not the end of the story, right?
Right. But in terms of the Roman stuff, yeah.
But if you look at not just Jesus, but two Catholic saints that I'm going to mention, St. Peter and St. Paul. St. Peter was crucified upside down.
Yes.
But St. Paul, being a Roman citizen, they couldn't crucify this guy.
And again, you and I were talking about that the other day and leading up to this episode, the fact that he was proud of his Roman citizenship, and because Roman citizenship carried with it lots of privileges, lots of rights under the law that other people did not enjoy. And so once it was found out, this guy he comes from an area that was granted Roman citizenship, then he has certain rights under Roman law.
They couldn't crucify this guy. So I think Paul was beheaded.
Yeah.
And then St. Peter, who was from Galilee, and fun fact, he's actually my confirmation saint. But he was going to be crucified, right? But he decided to be crucified upside down because he said he was not worthy to die like his Lord.
To be that way. Well, Robbie, thank you so much. There's some solid information in here that I think a lot of people may not know, and would really help to understand what was going on with the Roman crucifixion. So thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you for listening to Rostra. You may check out all our episodes on Spotify and follow us on social media at GuerinJCL. That's at GuerinJCL.